Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the episode, You Are Enough. I cannot emphasize that enough, that you are enough. Okay, enough plan words there or repetitiveness. But it's so important to recognize that you, just by being who you are enough. And for me, growing up and even into my adult life, there's a lot of times that I didn't feel like I was enough, that I was good enough. And I don't know about you, but the way I grew up was a perfectionist mom who was wonderful, warm and nurturing, and a pretty critical father. So that combination of feeling like, okay, I've got to be better was always the theme. So I never felt like I was enough. I needed to do more. One of the examples that I remember that my mom set for me, which really is examples of excellence. But it's interesting as a kid when it feels like the option is you have to be perfect. There were a few stories that I can recall. One is she led some really, really helpful ministries at the church where I grew up, St. Peter's in Richfield, Minnesota. And she was incredible at calligraphy. She was incredible at a lot of things. But I can remember she would make these posters for the fall festival and the various events that the church had. And I can still remember sitting next to her while she was working on these signs very diligently, doing that calligraphy and making them beautiful. If she would make one mistake, she would start all over. And very similar, this is going to age me, she used to type our papers in high school, and she would go through the whole thing on a page. And if she made a mistake, even toward the end, she would rip that out and do it all over. Thankfully, we discovered whiteout at some point, and she became willing to use that. But the point is, this theme of it's got to be perfect or it's unacceptable is what I grew up with. So for me, it was always about, I've got to be better. I've got to have this, there's just some almost unattainable thing, although it felt like, well, it must be attainable since there are beautiful signs that end up being produced. There is a paper that is produced with no errors on it. So that has shaped so much of who I am today. I'm wondering if you can relate to any of that. I'll share one more story related to my mom, and then we'll jump into some tips here. But I will never forget watching her, probably as a college kid, making the bed. We were just chatting. She was making the bed, and she kept spreading her hands out over it to straighten out the sheets when she finished and making sure there was no wrinkles on that bed. And I said, Mom, it doesn't have to be perfect. And she said, without skipping a beat, she said, well, honey, if you don't strive for perfection, you'll always be mediocre. And I'll tell you, that was another moment where I thought, oh, gosh, okay. But what I heard as a kid is you have to be perfect. She was saying strive for perfection. She wasn't saying you had to be perfect. But again, that's not what she said. But what was modeled to me made me think I had to be perfect. So I never felt like I measured up. And I want to give you a few tips today because I was inspired to do this episode when I was talking to a person, very prominent person in my life, who's a VP at her company. And actually I had a client and then, two clients today, essentially, that are both VPs in their industry, each tell me something where they didn't feel like they were good enough today. And I was thinking, okay, we got to do an episode on this one. So I have a few tips. The first one is to ask for what you need. Most people aren't very good at this, but the pre-step before asking is you have to know what you need. I didn't know what I needed until I was 40 years old. I didn't even know that emotional needs existed because in my house, it was always about pleasing everybody else. What does everybody else think? Everybody else's vote is more important than mine. And so I didn't even think about what my needs were. But I have come to learn, especially through the Townsend Leadership Program, of which I was a part for many years, I learned these skills about how to ask for what you need. And so, for example, when I first got married, I remember I was frustrated with Chris having all these papers on the desk. Instead of directly asking, "Hey, honey," well, let me back up. Let me tell you what I did and then how I would redo it. I, instead of just directly asking, I said, "So, honey, how long are these papers going to be on the desk?" And he said, "Use your words. What would you like to ask me?" It was really funny the way he said that. And I didn't realize how I didn't ask directly. And then I was actually really anxious about, like, I felt extremely uncomfortable saying, "Would you please clean up the papers on the desk because you know that I don't like clutter?" It's such a simple ask, but I felt so uncomfortable because I didn't feel it was my place to be able to ask him that directly. I wanted it to be implied, which is ironically, I teach so much on making a direct ask as opposed to passive, but I grew up mostly with the passive ask. So ask for what you need. And the first step before that is to own what it is that you need. You have to own it, then you have to ask. And that's going to help you to get your needs met, and you will be much happier and not resentful. The second tip is to call in the reinforcements. And there's a few sub tips for this one. The first one is sometimes if you're not feeling enough or good enough, the first step is connection. Call someone that you care about or that cares about you, both and, that you feel safe with. Call in your tribe. Find someone that you can talk to. I had a friend recently say, "Just the mere talking to you is making me feel better." So having those relationships will help to reinforce that you are good enough. The second part of the reinforcement, so sub bullet 2, is to ask people in your life for them to give you 5 qualities that are strengths of yours. These are really, really good things to do. It makes you feel so good. I've done this exercise a few times in my life, and it is a vulnerable thing. It might make you feel a little uncomfortable, but asking people in your life, ideally someone at home, someone that you work with, someone at like different parts of your life. It's a really great thing to ask for a different variety of people to help you to figure that out. It's a great way to get a sense of the breadth of your experience. In other words, not experience, the breadth of your personality, and how you'll probably notice that there are themes that exist you didn't necessarily think of yourself. When I first did this one, I was amazed at how many people said they feel comfortable around me, which was a very nice compliment. And that isn't something that I would have called out on my own, but it came out from this exercise. The next one, the third under reinforcements, is to create a celebration portfolio. This is simply a compilation of emails or cards that people have sent you that were compliments, things that make you feel good about yourself. And I love putting this in a hard copy. I've collected notes for years and put it in actually a plastic binder with those plastic sleeves. And I love being able to look at that sometimes. The other one is affirmations. What can you affirm in yourself? And it could be, "I am good enough." Could be simply that. Put that on Post-its all over your house so you can see those regularly and say it to yourself regularly. I would even recommend that you say it 7 times in the morning, just as you're getting up, then throughout the day as you think about it, and then at the end of the day as you're going to sleep. There's something about the research of that with your subconscious mind that will help you to solidify that more in your brain. And then you'll start really believing it, because that's what we need to do. We need to get that into your bones so you believe it. All right. So far, how to believe and get to feeling that you are enough. Number 1, ask for what you need. Number 2, call in the reinforcements. Let's move on to number 3. This is one of the hardest of all, and that is to avoid comparing yourself to others. Let's face it, there's always going to be somebody that is probably higher, how should I put this, that has more experience than you, that has more followers than you, whatever it might look like. and there's always going to be somebody who has less. But either way, it's a losing game. It might make you feel better for a little bit if you compare yourself to someone that, oh, they don't have as much success as me, or they don't have this. It's just not good to compare yourself to other people, because it sets this up as if there's better or worse things. And maybe there are better or worse things, but it's just not a very healthy practice. And you don't need to make yourself feel worse by comparing yourself to others. And you don't need to try to elevate yourself because somebody else just doesn't maybe have as much experience or clout or whatever you want to put it as you. Let's just say it's the opposite of kindness. And related to comparing yourself to others, let's talk about when it would be healthy, because I do think that there is a wonderful concept, the whole iron sharpens iron concept, that is good when another person helps you up your game or sharpen your skills. For example, I remember I was having a really down day once at looking at Instagram, and oh my gosh, this person is so great and they're doing so much. And yet I will tell you, this one person in particular really helped me up my game. There's actually a couple of people that have done that for me. I've thought, wow, look at what they're doing. I need to do more of that. One of my goals last year was to offer more of the tips that I do in coaching. I would call my, let's say, Instagram or LinkedIn feed, even, or if you call LinkedIn a feed, I'm not even sure, but I found that my tips were more just inspirational. Now, there's nothing wrong with inspiration, and that's really important, but I wanted more tangible, tactical tips. I thought, this is what I do in my coaching. Why am I not demonstrating this in my social media world? So when I saw a couple of other people doing that, I was jealous. I thought, oh my gosh, I would need to be doing more than that. At first, I got a little bit down because I was comparing myself to them. And then I thought, no, I need to start doing this. How hard is that? It's a matter of posting the things that I already do. So try to avoid comparing yourself to others. The last tip is to let go of what others think of you. Now, this is really, again, so much easier said than done. I recognize that these tips might make you go, that's so hard. How do you actually do that? I love this quote. What other people think of you is none of your business. Take that in. That's a really good one. And my suggestion is to accept what you can control and what you can't. Here's an exercise for you. Make 2 columns, and on the one side, put can control, and on the other, put can't. Start making a list of things that you can control versus what you can't. This is a good exercise for stress management. This is a good exercise for a lot of things, but related to what others think of you, I think we all know which column those are on, but it might be helpful just as an exercise to write down some of these things that it seems that you can control, but the truth is trying to figure out and make up. I mean, there's so many assumptions that we make up so many crazy stories in our head based on what we think other people are thinking of us. And the truth is most of us aren't even thinking of us. I hate to say that, but it's true. Most people aren't. They're so focused on themselves being good enough or not being good enough. They're not thinking about you. This is something really important. And I know this is a little bit of a digression, but it's especially important to remember when you're presenting something, because too often we feel like, oh, I have to get this perfect, or, oh, they saw that, or, oh, I can't, what are they going to think of me? They're probably not even noticing. They're probably thinking about what they're going to have for dinner that night or whatever. I'm not saying that you're boring. That is not what I'm saying, but by human nature, we get distracted. We're not riveted by everybody's every single word. We are multitasking, doing a bunch of things in our brain, probably even on our phones while we're listening to someone. So remember, it is not that big of a deal if you mess up. Don't worry about that. Now, related to what other people think of you and letting go of that, another exercise that has been helpful for me is to act as if you're holding a balloon. So close your eyes first. Imagine you're holding a balloon with the person or the problem or whatever it is that you're trying to control. And then take some deep breaths and imagine that you are letting it go out of your hand, like release your grip on it and imagine it going way into the sky. And you can see it disappearing into the sky. And if you have a faith in a higher power, for me, it's Jesus, God, that helps me to release it to Jesus, knowing, you know what? He's got it. God's got it. I can let go. And I know that old saying, let go and let God. I find that to be much easier said than done. So this is why I like some of these exercises to help me do that. Oh, here's another thing you could do. You can write as much as you want, either journaling or a list of all the things that you're trying to let go. What do you want to grieve that you need to let go? And grieving is a whole other topic. I'm doing lots of tangents on side topics right now, but write that down and then burn it. Burn it in a safe place, but it can be very cathartic to do that. Maybe you've already done that with something, but super helpful to do that. That's a way to release it into the universe and let it go. So those are some of my tips to believe that you are enough. Let's review. Number 1, ask for what you need. Number 2, call in the reinforcements. Number 3, avoid comparing yourself to others. And number 4, let go what others think of you. I want to remind you that you are enough. All of you exactly as you are. And I want to encourage you to accept yourself exactly as you are right now, that you are worthy and deserving just because you exist. You don't have to perform or do anything to be a good enough human being. You already are enough. And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.